So I have H naught, P equals half, and the alternative less than half. From the first sentence, I figured out the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Are prepared for college algebra. She obtains a simple random sample of 500 records, okay, 500 of students who have taken the ACT and finds that 219 are prepared for college mathematics, that is, scored such and such. Okay, I can immediately find p hat as 219 over 500. 219 divided by 500, and I get 0.438. Okay. Does this represent significant evidence that less than half, that's the claim, less than half of Illinois students are prepared for college mathematics upon graduation from a high school? Use alpha 0.05 level of significance. This is given to us now. Okay, first we have to check. We have the sample. We cannot move on before we check number 1 and number 2. NP1 minus P has to be less than or equal, greater than or equal to 10. And the other one, N has to be less than or equal to 0.05 uppercase N. We have to assume that Illinois has more than, so the 500 is definitely less than 5% of the entire population of students in Illinois. This one, I don't know, so this is N, which is 500, multiplied by 0.5, multiplied by 0.5. Let's see if this number is greater than or equal to 10. This is the independence. This is independence, this is normality. So 500 times 0.5 times 0.5, and I get 125. So both conditions are fulfilled, which means that p hat is approximately normal. And the distribution will be, I'll correct that. Mu p hat, sigma p hat. We always put the sigma second. Okay, let's determine them. And we know from the previous section, chapter of the course, that this is the same with the population proportion. And this has to be calculated. Sigma p hat is the square root of 0.5 divided by 500. We don't really have to determine it because we're going to do it with the calculator, but I just wanted to write the formula for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to stat, go to tests, go to one proportion z-test. It will give us the p-value. It will give us the, I should draw. That is very important. So this is a one-tail test, a left tail test, left. And the level of significance is all in this tail now. Alpha 0.05. Okay. So 0.5 again, X is 219, N is 500. Careful to change to the correct test, left tail test. It's up to you. You want to go to calculate, that's fine. I would like to see the draw, and the p-value appears in both. It doesn't matter. Look at that. So the Z statistic, or Z0, as it is in your book, is negative 2.7727, and I already obtained the p-value 0.028. So the Z statistic is right here somewhere, negative 2.77. With a p-value smaller than 0.05, we will reject the null hypothesis. So p-value less than alpha, reject the null hypothesis, and conclude there is sufficient evidence to conclude that less than 50% of students in such and such are prepared for college algebra. Any questions? Any questions here? Any questions? Any questions? Moving on to the next example. Okay, let's move on. When asked the following question, which do you think is more important, protecting the right of Americans to own guns or controlling gun ownership? 46% of Americans said that protecting the right to own guns is more important. Fine. So this is known. So there is a research center. They surveyed 1,267 randomly selected Americans with at least a bachelor's degree and found that X equals 559 believed that protecting the right to own guns is more important. Does this result suggest that the proportion of Americans with at least a bachelor's degree feel differently, this is the key word, differently, than the general American population when it comes to gun control? Use alpha 0.1. Level of significance. Can anyone give us the alternative? If we need to read it again, we can.
Yeah, if you could read it again.
Sure, of course, yes. So the question was, which do you think is more important? Protecting the right to own a gun or controlling gun ownership? Not everyone should have a gun. For example, I shouldn't because I don't know how to what to do with it. So why would I care for it? So 46% of Americans said that protecting the right to own guns is more important. So this is what is known. Okay. The Pew Research Center surveyed 1,267 people, and they were Americans with at least a bachelor's degree. That was the research. They wanted to know people who have at least a bachelor's degree, how do they think about the problem or the situation? And they found that 559 of those said it's more important to own a gun than controlling gun ownership. Fine. Does this result suggest that the proportion of Americans with at least a bachelor's degree feel differently than the general American population when it comes to gun control? And use alpha 0.1. What do you think about the alternative hypothesis? Is it a one-tailed test? Is it a two-tailed test? Is it a left? Is it a right? Or is it a two-tailed test? What do you think?
Is it I wish I had the question in front of me. I'm sorry.
Just open the handout. Go to the side and open the handout. It's posted. You don't have to print it out. Just Open the handout. It's on page 2. We have 3 pages. But the word differently, it's very clear what it means.
I feel like it could be a two-tailed test.
Absolutely, that's what differently means.
Yeah.
Exactly. Otherwise, the keyword would have been less, or the keyword would have been more. But the keyword is different, that's what it means. It's not this. By different, we cannot say higher or lower. By different, we can say it's not the same. Very good. We have to test our conditions. Okay, so test or check. Number 1 is NP sub 0, of course. 1 minus P sub 0 equals N1267 times 0.46 times 1 minus 0.46. Okay, let's see what we get. 1267 times 0.46 times 1 minus 0.46. And I got 314. Definitely greater than or equal to 10. And number 2, we are talking about is n less than or equal to 0.05 population size? Of course it is. We have way more than this. I mean, this is definitely less than 5% of the population. So this is the condition of independence, condition of normality. At this point, I will say that p hat, which I haven't calculated, but I have to calculate it. We don't really need it, but at least you know what I mean. We need to understand what's happening here. So this is 0.4412. So we know now that p hat is approximately normal because the conditions are fulfilled, and with a mean 0.46 and the standard deviation, the square root of 0.46 1 minus 0.46 divided by n. So let me write this again because it's not clear over there. P hat 0.46 1 minus 0.46 divided by the sample size 1267. This is what is there. Good, so let's take the calculator, go to tests, go to one proportion z test, and p 0.46, 559, n 1267. It's a two-tailed test. You know me, I want to draw. I want to see, but before we continue, I want to show what happens here, and then I'll hit enter on the calculator. So alpha is 0.1. So because it's a two-tailed test, I have to split alpha in 2. So I have on this side 0.05 and on this side 0.05. Okay, so now let's see what happens. Now I hit on draw. Here it is. So z equals, z statistic that I like to call it, coming from the sample, or z sub 0, is negative 1.3427, and the p-value is 0.1794. The calculator gives the entire p-value because it doesn't know whether we are looking at a one-tailed test or two-tailed test. So the p-value is greater than alpha, which is 0.1. In other words, the z statistic is here. In the non-rejection region, it's not out here or here in the rejection region. Therefore, fail to reject the null hypothesis. What do we conclude? There is not sufficient evidence to conclude that the proportion has changed. Insufficient evidence. There is not sufficient evidence coming from this sample to conclude that P is not 0.46. Okay, page 3. And any questions?